Hi, my name is Steven and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be talking to you about pushing through discomfort, doing the things that you don't want to do but need to do. When you have something critical or important that you need to do but you don't want to do it, what do you do? For many of us, the struggle is real and it's really hard to motivate ourselves to do the thing that we don't want to do. Because to take time and expend the mental energy that we require for us to complete that thing might be too much for us to handle sometimes. Things that aren't easy or dull to do can be a pain to accomplish without some tips or strategies. In my life, I've done many things that I weren't interested in but had to do because I needed to complete it in order to move on to something else. And I use these strategies to help me to push through the dull and tedious portions of my life that I don't want to do. Although it isn't bulletproof, these tips have helped me to create opportunities where otherwise wouldn't have happened if I took a long time in completing something or ignored it completely. By implementing these tips, my hope is that you'll gain benefits from doing discomforting things in your life. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about the background, my tips on pushing through discomfort, and my general thoughts. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, hit that notification bell if you like this content. And let's go. Most of what we do in life is really dull or tedious to complete. For example, the daily grind at work, brushing your teeth, or filling out endless forms. Life is filled with things that are boring, pointless, and quite frankly, a waste of time. But as much as we don't want to do these things, ignoring them or delaying them might have critical consequences to our life. Those consequences could be administrative errors that you need to fix further down the line, or long-term health consequences that could have been prevented with preventative action. So it's really important for us to complete these tasks even though they're discomforting to us, because it'll help us prevent future problems down the line. Because eventually our lives might be easier in the process by finishing those things. But I have a couple of tips and strategies to help you push through those discomforting things, and at least make these things a little bit more interesting and less painful for you to do in the process. The overarching idea is to try to simplify whatever process you're trying to complete and make it so that it's very easy for you to do one step to the next step. And if we make it as easy as possible, we're more likely to follow through with it. At the end of the day, take my lessons and strategies and see what works best for you. You don't need to implement all of my ideas, just the ones that you'll stick with for the long term. So here are my tips on pushing through discomfort. Number 1, is this important to do? As with most things in life, assess whether or not you need to complete that in the first place. Is it really something that you need to do right now, or can you put it off until later? In many cases, people try to push us to complete things before we're ready or because they want to complete it to make themselves look good. It may not need to be completed in the timeline that other people tell you that they need to be completed. So decide whether or not you need to do that boring and tedious thing in the first place before you start. When classifying the importance of something, know which tasks are important, urgent, and not urgent. Check out my previous video on time management using the 4 quadrants tool to get more understanding on how to categorize different tasks. And once you know that it's an important task for you to do, plan it to make sure that you're going to commit to it. I now would make a priority list and assign high, medium, or low priority to those tasks. This way you can categorize all the important and urgent tasks and also assign a high, medium, or low priority to them. That way you can get through your list in a more organized fashion. And the more organized you are, the easier it is for you to get through something boring and tedious. So when you're pushing through tasks that you don't want to do, ask yourself if it's important for you to do it in the first place. And then once you do, make a plan for you to complete it within some timeline. Because the things that you eliminate from your list is another headache that you don't have to deal with later down the line. Number 2, imagine the big picture. Changing your perspective on the task at hand is one of the best ways to push through something dull and tedious and discomforting. If you just look at the task by itself, it might not be flashy or glamorous in nature. But taking a step back and looking at the broader perspective of that task, you might be able to find something unique and interesting about what you're doing. And that might ultimately give you the motivation to push through and complete that task. For example, flossing and brushing your teeth might not be glamorous, but the daily ritual will help you cut down on the number of dentist appointments that you need and also help you to eliminate cavities and future pain in your teeth. Or finding the time to schedule an oil change for your car. It's not glamorous, but it's needed for the long term. Because having regular oil changes, you might also discover potential problems later down the line with your car that you might otherwise not see if you didn't go to regular appointments. Also, when you're taking another perspective or a broad view of something, you can identify future pain points down the line. For example, you might realize that if you don't do this thing, in the future it might cause you a lot of pain because of it. and that the current pain of doing something tedious or boring might not be as bad when you're looking at it from the long term. For example, getting good grades in school might lead to a great career or job later down the line. And that career and job might lead you to a lifestyle that's more suited to your nature. So when you're trying to push through something discomforting and tedious, try looking at it from a different perspective and seeing the broader picture of it. You'll discover that maybe it's not so bad in the short term when you have long-term benefits that you can gain from. Number 3, plan the steps. Once you convinced yourself that you need to do the task at hand, plan out the steps exactly how you would execute on them. When you write down a plan or outline, you give yourself a roadmap of what you need to do and the exact steps that you need to take in order for you to complete it. The steps are clear, and it gives your brain a roadmap of what you need to do in order to finish it. In effect, it makes it so much easier for you to complete because you know each individual step that you need to take. There's no ambiguity. Then the more detailed and easier it is, the more likely you are able to complete it. For things like flossing or brushing your teeth, make a nightly list of all the things that you need to do before you go to sleep. And by putting the floss and brush closer to the sink near your hand, you're more able to remind yourself that you need to do this in the first place. For more complex things like filing medical claims or insurance claims, try to find as much detail as you can about it before you start. So that means in each step, find as much information as you can and be as detailed as possible so you don't miss anything. You can do this by asking people in-depth questions about each step along the way, and then write down those steps and ask somebody if that's the steps you need to take in order for you to complete that task. The goal is to get crystal clear on what the process is before you even start it. Because once you start it and hit roadblocks, that's going to demoralize you and you might not be able to finish that task. The worst thing that you can do is be in the middle of filing a medical claim and then being roadblocked every step of the way and then you eventually give up. Every time I hit a roadblock, I'm less and less likely to finish it, even though it's important to me. So I really recommend for each dull and tedious and discomforting task, create a list of steps that you need to do in order for you to complete it. And for more complex tasks and problems, be as detailed as you can about the steps in that process. Because once you get organized and you have a process, you take some of that uncertainty about that task away. It's more easier for you to complete it. Knowing exactly what you need to do will help you boost your confidence and your ability to complete that task. Number 4, gamify it. Now that you're in the execution stage of completing that task, find a way to gamify it whenever possible. Gamifying a tedious task will help your brain stay more engaged with that task. When you make it a game or compete with others on that task, you lean into your natural tendencies to be competitive. Because you want to win, be the best, and feel confident in yourself. Gamification can focus your brain on making the task more enjoyable than it actually is. These games can be very silly or competitive based on the task you're trying to do at the moment. There is no set rules to this. The only thing that you need to consider is to make yourself play the game so that you can win it, and in this case, complete your task. So for example, flossing. You can make a silly game out of it to see how fast you can floss without hurting yourself. Or you can gamify filling out tedious documents by seeing how much of it you can remember and put in the form without looking to reference documents. It's definitely not the most exciting game for sure, but the alternative is to plod through the documents line by line, form by form, without any excitement. So when you're trying to go through something tedious or boring or discomforting, make it a game whenever possible. The game can be whatever you want it to be. The key is to have your brain stay engaged with the task at hand. And hopefully that game motivates you to completion. And number 5, celebrate completion. And lastly, be sure to celebrate completion of that boring, tedious, or discomforting task. This reinforces your brain and conditions itself to want to finish boring tasks in the future because you'll get a reward from it. A simple example of this is to give yourself a piece of candy for every boring form that you fill out. The need to celebrate boring or tedious tasks helps us offset some of the negative reinforcement that we have of completing those dull tasks. Because to do those tasks without reward over a long period of time can be very painful for you. In general, I don't think we celebrate enough when we accomplish something within our lives. We do so many things that it's impossible for us to reward ourselves for each thing that we've done. But there are cases in which we need to give ourselves a little break and reward us for completing something. Because that way, at least we'll have a little bit of positive reinforcements whenever we do something that we don't want to do. Another example could be giving yourself a nice dinner after a long, hard work day. Or making sure that after 10 hours of studying for a midterm or an exam, that you dedicate 2 hours to hanging out with friends. This means that you're periodically rewarding yourself for tedious and boring and discomforting tasks. Or you can have different rewards during each milestone that you accomplish. That way you're more likely to complete boring tasks in the future because you have a reward coming. And in general, I would give out rewards that scale to the task at hand. You don't want to end up in a place where you're giving yourself a new car just because you brushed or flossed that day. So take in the joy of accomplishment of some boring or tedious tasks whenever you can. So here are my thoughts on pushing through discomfort. The ability to push and motivate ourselves to do things that we don't want to do is a really underrated skill. And I think the more that we can excel at this skill, the better our lives will be in the long run. Because most things in life that we do are not enjoyable, but they're the tedious things that we need to do in order for our lives to run smoothly. Day-to-day stuff, our routines, and administrative stuff all have to be completed one way or another. But to live somewhat of a stress-free life, these things can be important for you to complete in a timely fashion. It's only when you don't do them is when you see the consequences of not completing dull or tedious tasks. And the stress and discomfort that you'll end up with will be 10 times or more than the amount that you would have spent if you just completed that boring task in the first place. For example, not getting that oil change and spending your money somewhere else might result in that car not working in the future. And at that point, it will be a lot more money than an oil change to get it fixed. And during this time when you're getting that car fixed, your job might not be paying you because you're not showing up to work. And your employer might let you go because of that. So you might lose a job just because you didn't get an oil change. This is a simple example, but nonetheless, it is important to see how cascading events can happen. I've had friends that didn't file their medical paperwork correctly, or that there was an error that they didn't catch, and they resulted in many thousands of dollars in bills that they didn't anticipate paying. So being able to complete those boring, tedious, or discomforting tasks is a really great skill to have in your life. And the more we can mentally prepare ourselves to complete those tasks, the better off we'll be able to sustain it for the long run. Because I see a direct correlation to how many boring tasks that we complete and our life satisfaction overall. So those are my tips and strategies for pushing through discomfort when you don't want to do something but you need to do it. Boring, dull, and complicated tasks might demotivate us and cause us not to complete them in the first place. But now more than ever, I think we need to do our due diligence and complete those tasks whenever possible. Not only is it good for our short term to complete something off our list, but over the long term as well to prevent things that might go wrong later. And limit the potential of stress and anxiety later down the line if we have to fix something that went broke because we didn't complete something boring or dull. I have done plenty of dull, tedious, and boring things within my life because I knew that if I didn't complete it, it would end up costing me something in the future. And in pushing through these tasks, I've created organized methods and strategies in order for me to motivate myself while doing it. It has really helped me to deal with the discomfort of pushing through something that I don't want to do, and I really hope that it helps you also push through that discomfort. So thank you for watching. Please leave me a comment down below on what do you do to push through discomfort and would you recommend that to others? And I'll see you next time.